Everyone is going through something that they're not talking about. So let us talk about that today in this episode of the Your Rich Life podcast. If you listened to last week's episode, you'll know that I said today I was going to be talking to you about communication. But over the last 5 days or so, there's been a series of serendipitous experiences or events that have led me to want to talk to you about this today, this very thing that people are going through something that they're not talking about. And I want to share those events with you. I want to share why I think they're important and what I've learned and what I'm inviting you to consider as well. And then for the first time, I think ever in a podcast, I'm going to finish the podcast episode on pulling a few oracle cards, just because today is the 22nd of the 2nd, 2022. It's a hugely powerful day in the calendar, and basically, why the hell not anyway? So let me start with the first thing that happened, which has led me to wanting to talk to you about this today. And that is that last Wednesday, I went away for a few days to the Cotswolds, beautiful part of the UK, and I was so excited to be going to visit a friend for a few days and having some time out. And anyway, after we'd had breakfast one morning, I was walking back through the village and walked past a shop with this huge sign in the window that said exactly that everyone is going through something that they're not talking about. And it hit me really, really deeply, because over the past 3 months or so, there have been many, many days that I have literally wanted to walk around wearing a billboard telling people that I've lost my dad, in that hope that just for one moment that people could see past their own business and their own lives and extend maybe a smile, a hug, or even just a simple "I'm thinking of you." And maybe that sounds a little weird, and maybe it sounds even a little bit selfish, but if nothing else, this episode is completely committed to my total transparency and honesty about emotions I'm having and where I'm at, in the hope that it encourages you to feel able to do the same thing. And I know that if you're listening to this podcast, you understand and you value that level of transparency and honesty. So let's go back to the billboard. And when I had that visual of me doing that, walking around saying, my dad's died, there's several reasons why the emotions that I feel when I'm thinking that. And number one, I feel like to some degree it justifies my irrational thoughts and behaviours, because they are pretty frequent at the moment, behaviours that I wouldn't normally exhibit, having, emotions of real anger and lack of patience, and just sometimes not being a very nice person. And I feel like wearing that billboard would let people know, oh, I get why she's being slightly erratic. And also, I guess, to some degree it stops me from drowning in the loneliness of the emotions. I've never obviously experienced what I'm experiencing now, and some of you will understand what I mean when I say that sometimes being in your emotions feels incredibly lonely. Now, I know from a coaching perspective that any one of us at any one time is not feeling an emotion that hasn't been felt by somebody else. Emotions are universal. We all experience emotions very differently, but the themes, the schemes of emotions are universally the same. But that doesn't really help when you feel like you're in the guts of those emotions. It doesn't necessarily stop you from feeling lonely. And I think we need to be totally okay with that. So that's kind of where the billboard thing comes in. It sort of feels like it's a bright shining light over my head that says, this girl's got permission to be erratic, irrational, and to feel dark and lonely. So kind of like leave her alone and show some compassion. The next serendipitous thing that happened was that I stayed with a wonderful woman who ran an Airbnb, beautiful kind of English country cottage. And we had a really good conversation, and she told me how, she'd had quite a good life, and she'd been a teacher, and long story short, she'd given up teaching and set up a charity which she now runs with 15, 16 of her own staff for vulnerable children. And during that story, she told me how she'd switched from always being on and always feeling like she needed to achieve, and she started to experience life and to be fully present in her life. And she said, I've got the perfect book for you, Louise. And she handed me a book called Rest. I will come to that on another episode. I've started reading it. Fantastic. Now, third thing. So this break, I've been excited about this break for a long time. Super excited to be with a friend in a different place, in the countryside, eating, drinking, walking, all that kind of stuff. But it actually turned into a 24/7 argument with myself about wanting and needing that time out with friends to relax and to read and to write, but actually counter argued with this insanely strong desire to do nothing but hide in my bed. And I had this constant, palpable feeling of wanting to drive back to the sanctuary of my own home. And I fought that for the whole time I was there. And I didn't understand it. I was like, what the hell is going on? I've been looking forward to this break, and yet I feel like I'm on high alert all of the time. And the fourth thing that happened was that this wonderful friend that I went to visit lent me several books. And one of the books is called Wintering, which I've now almost finished. And as I've gone through that book and read it and absorbed the insanely beautiful words of the author, I have felt this weight releasing from my chest. Now, without making this episode about the book, basically the whole theory is, if we look at the way that Mother Nature responds to winter, where the leaves drop and things look dead, but actually they're gaining all their energy for their new growth, that we as human beings don't just experience winter or wintering in the winter. There are periods in our life when we too need to winter. And I know now that I'm in a wintering period, and we're going to kind of go a little bit further into that in a second. So I now find myself in somewhat of a vacuum. And here's some of the realizations that have come from that. And I would love to know whether you relate to any, some, or maybe even all of these. I would relate to myself and describe myself as someone who has always been an action taker, a why notter. In other words, like, well, why not just try doing that thing? I most certainly am driven more by the human need for uncertainty than certainty. So I really relish change, and I relish challenge. The older I've got, the more I've felt that there is never enough time and that I mustn't waste it. And if I do waste it, I'm lazy and I'm unambitious. Setting up my business 10 years ago magnified an unconscious belief that I had that to be worthy, I needed to be something. And I then equated that to being successful. So if I was successful, I was worthy, I was validated, and I was accepted. And perhaps the one that I'm sitting most with right now is the following. Without doubt, being a coach has changed my life for the better, 100%. However, whilst I have learned that we all relate to our personalities, and that discovering our stories and identities that limit us and changing them changes our life, that's number one. And that we can also change our emotional state at will. So how we feel, we can change it at will at any given moment. Again, another life-changing tool. What I see as sitting back now and viewing those two things together is that I've somewhat let myself be blinded by my teachers and mentors, many of them who are world-renowned in their field, most of them, if not all of them, men, which I find very interesting. What I've realised is in that making my life so strategically based, process-based and outcome-orientated, I stopped recognizing that my emotions are a valuable guidance system. I got to the stage where when I felt an emotion that is what we call unresourceful, like we don't like to define emotions by negative or positive, or I don't anyway. So as a coach, I tend to use resourceful or unresourceful, i.e., do they put you in a space where you take good action, or do they put you in a space where you're more likely to make bad decisions and not act in a way that would serve you? But what I recognised was that I had packed those away, and that every time I had an emotion that was unresourceful, I linked it to a belief that I had about myself, and I tried to work on the belief, or I tried to act myself out of it, or I tried to do something, anything, other than ask myself, is there a learning? Is there a need for me to sit with this emotion and listen to it? And I had this conversation with a client this morning, and I said to her, it's a little like you hearing your son knock on your bedroom door, mummy, 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 and never opening the door to find out what he wanted? How many of you know that there are emotions knocking at your door, trying to get your attention, trying to get in, but you're refusing to listen to them? And what is it that you don't want to listen to? Now, what I'm not saying, let me just get this very clear as well, is that understanding, investigating the stories and the beliefs and the behaviors that you have that are limiting your life experience, and understanding that your personality has been a creation and that you get to recreate it, and understanding that yes, you can at any point in time change your emotional state. All of that stuff is hugely powerful, life transforming work. And it should never be underestimated, and that nearly every single person, if not every single person in the world, would benefit from having some coaching and mentoring and teaching around that, so that we can unlearn how to be us and relearn how to really be us. Whole other episode. But in order for that work to be even more powerful, what I'm realizing is that we have to have an elevated self-awareness, not just the knowledge. The knowledge itself, I'm feeling, could actually be more destructive if we don't prioritize elevating our self-awareness to find out where our emotions are being sneaky and actually trying to limit us, keeping us safe by keeping us where we are, and where our emotions are actually an invitation for us to dig a little deeper, to change the way that we're experiencing life, to remove ourselves from the busyness, to do more of what we love. But being able to create that differentiation requires our willingness to raise self-awareness and then to utilize the knowledge that we have. So I'm hoping I haven't been waffling, but I guess I should get to some kind of point. And I guess the point is this: do not deny what you are feeling. You don't need to be unhappy to not be happy. I've worked with a lot of people. I talk with a lot of people. I've been through enough of my own crap, and I sense so much disconnection from self as people lose themselves in the busyness of simply just getting through each day. We have rapidly learned to dilute our emotions to a manageable level with things like food and alcohol, drugs, TV, and specifically social media. And in the race against ourselves to achieve and attain, we've forgotten some of the really simple things that used to bring us so much joy, peace, and fulfillment. And I want to encourage you in this episode to be willing to stop for just long enough to feel what's really going on. And the reason that many of you won't do that, apart from not knowing that you need to do it, and perhaps this is the first time you've actually thought, oh, I'd never thought about it like that before. But one of the main reasons that people don't do it is because it's not easy. In fact, it may well be one of the hardest things that you have to do. As most people that you know probably won't be doing this either, because most people don't, it's potentially a very lonely journey. It's also potentially very, very uncomfortable, because as you start to witness, you have to take responsibility for the things in your life that don't make you feel good. It's also potentially a bit of a mind, I don't know the right word, that's not swearing, like it can mess your head up at the same time, because you will have no idea, no conscious idea at first, why you feel this way and what on earth you're going to do about it. And so that's why, for me, this whole process of learning this wintering process in the book, I can't tell you the author, I'm afraid, but the wintering is giving me a doorway into a world where we talk way more about retreating and resting, not from a place of being weak, which is perhaps where I thought I was coming from before, but from a place of knowing that we are Mother Nature's creations, and that we live cyclically, and that there are going to be times when we need to honor that rather than push through it. Wintering is a time when we can embrace nurturing as a way to renew. We can use wintering as a way to lean in to our emotions rather than leaning away from them, and to learn from them. For me, that's looked like sleeping a lot. I can sometimes be up for just a couple of hours and sit on the sofa and like have another 10-minute cat nap. Because when you are constantly busying yourself and pushing through, sure, you can run on cortisol, you can run on adrenaline, you can run on that need to keep going. But at some point, I'm going to hazard a guess that something's going to knock you sideways. Sadly for me, it's been the loss of my dad. But something else would have happened that would have made me come to this space now where I need to do all of these things. So sleeping a lot is one of my things. Like you will probably often see me in bed at 8 o'clock right now. I'm not working on my business. I'm doing my podcast because I love the podcast, and I hope you do too. But I'm probably going to get rid of my free Facebook group. I'm not sending out emails very often. I'm just not in that space yet because this evolution for myself is so massive. It would be doing a disservice to myself and anybody that I work with to try and create something new in this particular space. I'm reading the things I want to read. So like not really personal development right now, just other things that I feel drawn to read. And sometimes that's a chapter of this book and a chapter of that book. Like I'm diluting the definitions. I'm releasing some of the boundaries that have kept me kind of locked in. So just doing it as I want. I'm really not making any plans. I wake up in the morning and I know there are some things that I do for the benefit of myself, like getting outside in nature and walking the dog, like doing some kind of exercise. But after that, the day is an open book for me right now. And I'm prioritizing experiences with the people that I love, experiences with just myself, just like how can I really feel connected to this thing called life. And one of the things that I had to remind myself, because fear constantly kicks in, the judgment constantly kicks in. Louise, you're being lazy. Louise, you're repeating bad behavior. Louise, you're not ambitious. Louise, you're never going to get anywhere. Louise, it's like the voices are loud. And I want to tell you that because you're probably going to feel that too. And you're going to feel like you're going a bit cray-cray. But I keep reminding myself, this is not forever. This is for now. Now, as you know, I like to try in every episode to give you something to take this conversation and help you apply it to your life. And it's not necessarily about doing something more or adding more to your already busy life. Maybe it's just a way to think differently or to feel differently, because one of the things that's become evident to me over the last, even just a few days, is that when we downplay, ignore, suppress, deny our emotions, and we try and fit into what people are telling us to do, it's like trying to fit yourself inside yet another flat pack box where there are specific things that you have to do that come with definite instructions, with an expected outcome. Well, life just isn't always like that. And it's convoluted and sometimes it's complicated, and we are emotional, spiritual beings having this human experience on earth with things being thrown at us all the time. So these questions that I've got for you today, the power of three questions for you, I'm asking you to consider whether, like me, perhaps you've got stuck in that flat pack box of what success looks like, what you should be doing, the kind of person that you should be, the kind of mum, employer, business owner, what body you should have. So many of our limitations and sadness and unfulfillment comes from the fact that we have been flat packed. And we're trying to follow the instructions, and we're trying to build something that actually isn't in alignment with our soul, with our values, with our true purpose and what makes us happy. So perhaps these three questions will help you to escape that box and to be something bespoke and unique. So question number 1, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much joy and fulfillment do you feel on a daily basis? And I mean really feel on a daily basis. And to give you some context, I would like to invite you to think about a time when you felt absolute joy and fulfillment. Like you can think about that time now, and you can hear what you was hearing, you can feel what you was feeling, and you can see what you were seeing. And compare your daily joy and fulfillment to that. And then score yourself from 0 to 10. Second question, what is stopping you from having a greater score now? Whether that's from moving from 0 to 1, or from 5 to 10, or from 4 to 8, it doesn't matter. What is stopping you? What do you believe is stopping you from having a greater score right now? And thirdly, what would you need to stop and or start doing to start making that change today? Now think of three things. It may be three things to stop or three things to start. It may be a combination of all of them. But again, be mindful, I'm not here to tell you to add more to your life unless it's more experience and more depth of feeling and connection to your life. So if that means it's something simple like I need to stop eating takeaways 4 times a week and start eating fresh food, that's a start. If you need to start being more present with people and stop being on your phone, that's a really good start too. So I want to guide you away from our natural driven instinct to do more and ask you to consider what actually brings more into your life on an emotional and experiential basis. And let me just pull those 3 cards that I said I would for you. And interesting, oh my goodness, we've got all the mind cards coming out. Okay, beautiful. We've got 2 cards of the mind, and the mind cards tend to be, I'm going to say negative here, but more as in what's holding us back. So we've got a morality card, and the morality card says be very, very mindful of what you hold in your mind to be right or wrong, true or false, good or bad, because a lot of those morals won't belong to you. It's been conditioned, and they're actually like caging you in. They're keeping you cloudy. They're keeping you away from clarity. So be careful about what morals you hold. And it may be time to redefine them, to start to erase some of those definitions and boundaries and recreate your own ones. Following straight on from that is the card of control. And when we try and control everything, we become very rigid, very angular, very pointed. We can only see one way. And that's what happens when we get into that space of taking what we hear and learn as verbatim from people because they're in positions of power. It's something that I'm sitting with now, like there is no right way, no one way. That's another episode that I did, so go listen to that. We have to be able and willing to have the self-awareness and the courage to go our way, taking this incredible amount of knowledge that's available to us, but using our self-awareness to use what we need when we need to use it. So the warning card here is the morality and the control. What are you trying to control that's holding you back, that's keeping you rigid, that's keeping everything so very angular? If you think about an experiential life, does it not feel and visualize to you as something more fluid and light and a sensation of feeling rather than being something very angular and very logical and linear? Finally, what they're saying to you is when you can release these things, raise awareness and release these things, you come into a place of flowering, where there is a abundance all around you. There is a voluptuousness. There is an abundance of you sharing your love and your knowledge and your joy and your fulfillment, and you do it with so much ease. There is this ability to live from your heart center and to just be. The total opposite of those other 2 cards. So I'm super grateful that we got that guidance today. Thank you for listening to this episode. Maybe it's a bit of a rant, I don't know, but I hope you took something from it. And if you did, please do leave me a comment. And remember, if you listen to this on iTunes, please do subscribe and leave me a review. It really helps bump me up the charts a little bit, and share this with anybody that you think will benefit from it. Thanks again. Speak to you again in the next episode of the Your Rich Life podcast.